Hi, I am Joseph Emrode,
Hi, I'm Violet Campbell.
and today we will be presenting the treatise, A Plain and Easy Introduction to Practical Music, written by Thomas Morley in 1597 and revised twice, once in 1971 and 1973. Music, as I am sure you are all aware, is a very important part of modern culture. And it was just as important to the cultures of Renaissance Europe and pretty much everywhere else in the world. However, just like any other form of academic study, music requires education, whether that be informal by rote, informal by word of mouth, or formal study like we are doing right here at Susquehanna. As such, without the relevant materials, learning music is going to be very hard. One of such materials actually comes in the form of language, either being spoken or written, but today it's going to be more written. As I'm sure anybody that has experience trying to read something in another language can attest to, if you are not fluent in said language, you're going to have a very bad time trying to read it. But today we're going to be discussing Thomas Morley and his contribution not only to the English language, but also to the facilitation of music education within the English language. This treatise details in a plain and easy manner, teehee, see what I did there, the method of which to sing and understand musical practices of the time, specifically Renaissance-era continental Europe. It's written in the form of a dialogue between a learned man of music and a student, and is the first major treatise written in the English language. Possibly also, it is also the most influential treatise written in the English language. It contains many diagrams, tables, and musical examples to encourage the study of music.
There are 29 of the original 1597 works that still exist, and there are 11 copies in Germany, 1 in the Netherlands, 2 in Switzerland, 1 in Sweden, 11 in Great Britain, 1 in Ireland, and 2 in France, and the original copy can be seen on the far left. There are 2 other editions of Morley's A Plain and Easy Introduction to Practical Music that are well known. These include the Tompkins facsimile in the center and the Norton reprint, which is to the far right. The Thomas Tompkins facsimile began being published and distributed in 1971. The work is an exact copy of Thomas Tompkins, a composer and theorist, personal copy of Morley's work. In his copy, he added annotations in the margins of the book and also altered some of the examples that Morley used in his book, this allowing him to further explain what Morley was trying to teach through his book. Copies of this facsimile can be found in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Australia, Netherlands, and South Africa. On the far right, you see the Norton reprint edition, which was published in 1973. The only difference is that it has from Morley's original is that it contains a foreword by Thurston Dart, a musicologist. This edition is widely available. We have one here at SU, but it's currently missing. We hope to track it down.
There are also other ways that you can access this treatise. Most prominently, the Bibliotheca Casanatense in Rome digitized the entire original 1597 publication of the treatise. The Bavarian State Library also completely digitized their 1597 edition. And there are also various other sources on IMSLP and through various other academic institutions, including the University of Indiana, which I personally used in my research of this treatise. Now, Violet will introduce the first author of this treatise, and arguably the one that made the most contributions to the treatise, Thomas Morley.
So Thomas Morley was born in 1557 or 1558. There's not a clear set year in Norwich, England, and he died in 1602 in London, England, at a fairly young age for someone in this time period. He was a composer, theorist, and madrigalist and held jobs at churches, and he studied under William Byrd. Morley also had a bit of a questionable moral character. We talked about in class how he was one of the first plagiarists. Morley would translate songs to English and pass them off as his own and neglect to give the original composer any credit. Here we have Sing We Enchant It. It's a piece transcribed to English by Morley, but was really composed by Giovanni Gastoldi. Morley owned a printing monopoly, so his motivation for writing his work, the Plaine and Easie introduction, was kind of just to make money. He wanted to distribute this copy and make money off of what he was going with because that was the resource he had. Here we have an excerpt from the Tompkins facsimile. As you can see, Thomas Tompkins took examples of Morley's play songs and would canon them or rewrite them, and this just allowed him to further build upon what Morley was trying to teach, because a lot of what Morley put in his book was very unclear or vague.
Now, the original treatise is divided roughly, actually very exactly, into 3 distinct parts. The method of which to sing and understand music notation, the method of which to improvise a descant given a written melody, and the method of which to understand and compose in 3 or 4 parts. I should note, before explaining these, that the explanations presented are very shallow, and they do not delve very deep as to why you should write things this way. It only explains how they are and what you should do. Part 1 is to sing a simple song, and it establishes the very basic principles of pitch, rhythm, modes, the Ars Nova notation, which is related to rhythm, clefs and pitches, solfege, and I don't know why we included rhythm choice, but we're going to roll with it. A series of notes and a diagram was actually established by Morley to explain the different pitches and also the mutations of said pitches being flat or sharp. The chart of notes corresponds roughly with the Guidonian hand, so we can see Guido di Arezzo's work hasn't quite been rendered obsolete. Clefs were also established, and so was the staff. This way, you would be able to know which note was what, using any given clef on any given staff. There is also the notation and identification of rhythm, which, as I mentioned before, is still using the Ars Nova practice of modal rhythm. Here, we can see the Ars Nova's impact in practice. I will take the second example here, that being mode imperfect but with time perfect. The mode being imperfect, meaning duple, 1, 2, 1, 2, but with time being perfect, that means that there are 3 beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this would be corresponding roughly with today's 6/8 or 12/8 meter. Part 2 is to sing a descant on a simple song. Intervals, especially perfect intervals and consonances, are explored here and given special emphasis. Fourths, fifths, and octaves are all considered to be perfect here. There is the emphasis on the amplification of consonances and the strict control of dissonances in this part. Morley also explores chordes, not chords. Basically, what this boils down to are what intervals are considered to be consonant and dissonant. He also goes into how to improvise a discant line using an existing melody, and that is to sing in a fourth or fifth above, but more often than not, a fourth. Here we can see a chart that Morley drew up that explains to us which notes are considered to be consonant concordes or dissonant discordes. Note here, however, that some of these intervals, like 15ths, 13ths, 20ths, have since fallen out of use, and instead we refer to them by their simplified means. For example, a 20th would simply just be a fourth. Part 3 is to sing and compose in 3 or 4 parts. Counterpoint and consonances are identified here and explored in further detail, and he also goes into detail about the existing cadences of the time. Tonality here being somewhat of a new topic, so these cadences are not quite similar to the ones that we would learn in music theory. He also makes mention of the different styles of the time and roughly how to compose in said styles, such as the madrigal, canzonet, and the galliard. And he also makes special mention of the poetry which one must use for the lyrics in order to make the song to be complete. Here, Morley has drawn up a useful chart on the construction of chords in order to make them consonant or dissonant, mostly consonant. Everybody loves consonants. Unless if you love dissonance, then that's your opinion. Here, we also have a table that Morley drew up that is explaining what notes you should expect to see in any given cadence. For example here, tenor line is remaining relatively the same, the bass, same thing, and we also have an ascending soprano line. This is basically what you should expect and what you should try to write.
So why was the treatise important? Well, Morley's work had a big impact on the English language. This treatise was the first music glossary to be published in English. All of the other major treatises before this were either written in French, Italian, German, Latin. This was the first to be directed towards the English-speaking world, and it allowed a unification in the music world.
However, Morley's work also had more of an impact than just on the English language. Morley's treatise affects the very basis of music education in the entire English-speaking world up to this day. Being the first to write down a report on your observations of something sets a precedent in which the following scholars may add or rebuke. In this case, however, we can see very clearly in modern music theory that most of the materials that Morley presents are clearly seen as foundational. He very clearly set a precedent that is now seen as the principles of modern music. However, the manner of which the treatise was written also had a long-lasting impact on music education as well. As we have mentioned, the treatise itself was merely another part of Morley's successful printing business, and he had an incentive to publish as much material as possible in order to turn a large profit. Being the precedent-setting material that it was, albeit very shallowly written, this had a very deep impact on every music textbook to follow. Say, for instance, a student were to take a look at any music theory textbook, say, I don't know, tonal harmony. More often than not, the text will offer no explanation as to why subjects are seen as so important, other than a shallow explanation that basically just says, this is what they did in the common practice period, so we're doing it here. This very clearly parallels Morley's book. He does not go into great detail. He only explains what to do, not why to do it. This text is, by the definition of setting precedent, the most influential scholarly resource on music in the English language, not only for its contents, but also for the manner in which it was conceived.